ladies and gentlemen of the internet, to your absolute favorite podcast, 10 Cent Opinions. On this week's episode, we've got Colton. Colton, you are here, right?
You didn't. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got
Yeah, I'm
cut
here.
off. And Michael, our very special guest.
What's up?
And we're going to be talking about what makes a good character, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for.
You need that confirmation there.
Yeah, comfort.
It makes him feel better about himself, actually, to have us tell him that he's right.
It's very important. Do you know how
You're
hard
right,
it is
no.
being a host? No.
Right.
You don't understand.
You're absolutely right.
But characters are the center of any story. And so they show up in a lot of art. And so it's important to understand what makes a good character. I was talking with a guy a while ago, and he gave me this canned response, which was like, they have to have character development, and they have to, I can't remember what he said. It was something like they need good character development and they need good emotional response. And then when I tried to ask him how you get that or what does that really mean, he couldn't answer it. So it might be a case where lots of people can recognize a good character, but they don't understand what makes up a good character. Or maybe it was just this guy. But I think it's important to discuss either way.
I think a lot of people attribute good characters with complexity. For the most part, that's true. I'd say. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that's true?
Well, complexity can lead to good character design, or just good characters, but I'd say that having a complex character just for the sake of him being complex is never the right answer. It's sort of
Yeah.
the sense where how complex the character is, like what makes them up, and then how deep you can bring out the emotion or the idea you want to express with the story. So you could have a really simple character, such in like the Yotsuba manga, where it's a very straightforward character. She's happy and has an innocent look on the world, but the emotion and the idea they want to express through that character is a bit more deeper, but it doesn't need a complex way of expressing it.
Mm.
That's interesting, because in that sense, then it would say that you don't necessarily need a good character in order to have a good storytelling.
No, because the way you let Yotsuba, or for giving you example, the way Yotsuba interacts with the world, this is still part of her character, but it has to be handled well. Because if it's not handled well, then even if you have a simple character, then the idea you want to express will never be successfully done.
Hmm.
So perhaps a good character is more than just a set of ideas. It's also the way you use them. What do you guys think?
I think it's an interesting way to point out that it really depends on how you define what makes something good, which is something we've argued extensively.
Well, no, we were arguing about what makes something art.
So if you're talking about like morally good, that's not too hard to figure out.
It's true.
Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about more of a well-made character?
Sure.
Like how you define what art is good, because if we were going under the assumption that you need good characters in order to have good art, or you at least need characters which can be used by the story in order to get a point across, which would imply that good art is defined as art that has a good impact on you, right?
Right.
Wait. How did
you?
or Michael, you go on. Sorry.
Okay. So I was just gonna say that's right with the whole art thing about you don't really need complexity. Like in The Hobbit, the characters are really simple in that.
It's true.
It's good and evil, but the art is pretty much it's pretty forward, like pretty straightforward. I mean,
Yeah, the way they use the characters in The Hobbit, the way they use Bilbo is what's important, not
right?
Bilbo's complexity.
Yeah, he's not complex at all, really. He's transparent all the way, but you know,
But then in a lot of in sci-fi, actually, you have characters who demand more complexity because they're dealing with more complex worlds and themes. So like
yeah,
uh, the Major from Ghost in the Shell has to have this deep confliction with her personal self, who she is, her sense of identity, and so on and so forth. Whereas in The Hobbit, you don't need any of that. You just need a guy who's kind of lazy. Both of those are really good stories, but the complexity of their characters varies based on what type of story is being told.
Thing to talk about. I don't think necessarily that definition of, well, it requires character development and whatever the other one was, right? But we describe sort of what makes a good character as a complexity.
Say that again. I think you got cut off.
We define good character as a person with complexity, and in that sense, then Bilbo isn't a good character. And we also, in the same sense, that Yatspa wouldn't be a good character either, right? But if we define what makes a good character based on the development that the story causes on them, and subsequently on the viewer who puts themselves in the character's shoes, right? Then
Did you say something or did you get cut off? You said then and then nothing came out.
I think my mic is really choppy. I was saying that a good character would be one based on character development, not necessarily character complexity.
I see where you're going, but I wouldn't agree with character development. I would more so because character to get development is one part of using a character. You can have a character grow and realize themes that address certain ideas that the book wants to express. But another way you could use it is in character actions, character personalities, character motives. All those things can help tell a specific or point towards a specific idea without actually changing the way the character acts. So, no, I'm not
I
going to
think
use can. Go on.
I see what's happening here. I think fundamentally, Noah, you think that characters themselves are simply pieces in the overall game of art.
Yes, they're just tools to an end. Now, they are very important tools, but they are just one of artisan's tool.
The artisan's toolbook, if you will.
The artisan's way. Yeah.
How do you feel about the definition?
I think he meant to say Michael, but you also got cut off.
How do you feel about that definition?
you talking
Do
to
you
me?
feel that character?
Are you talking to Michael?
Can you hear me?
You're
No.
getting cut off.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll sort it out. You guys keep going.
The definition didn't really. So Colton was saying that it was character development, not complexity, right?
I think he was saying that the complexity doesn't matter, but the character development does.
Yeah. Yes. That doesn't really answer the question. What makes a good character, though?
It's true. We haven't actually.
I don't
We haven't
think
really
any-
touched on that. All right, Michael. Because this is a fairly extensive question. So
Yeah.
give me a bit of what you think goes into a good character.
Well, I think it's first of all completely situational, depending on what the character, like the situation of the character. So, for example, if it's a horror movie, the character needs to fit what the director or the writer wants it to fit. So, if he wants the character to fit someone who fights back, and is not just scared and runs, then he has to hit all these points for that. I think it's so in that sense it's very situational. It's you gotta first define which circumstance the character is under, and then from there.
Right. You should craft your story based on what you're trying to tell. So,
So the definition I would say in a short sentence is a good character is a character that does the job that the writer wants it to.
mm. So can you give me an example of, because you said it was situational. So give me a situation or give me a story that has a good character.
Let's see. The Walking Dead, I don't watch it anymore, but I used to be a big fan of it. And so the main character, the whole thing centers around this apocalypse that destroys everything, and then now there's no civilization, which means there are no boundaries and people can do whatever they want. So the main character, Rick Rick Grimes, he's a guy who is supposed to be the kind of the moral compass for everyone, because even though there's nothing to stop him from killing people and taking their stuff, he still does it because he knows that's right, and that's what separates him from the bad guys in the show. So his job, I would say, is to be is to be someone like the conscious that everyone has, and I think he puts it pretty good in the show.
Okay, so in this sense, the director wanted to show what it would be like to have a character who is still moral in a unjust world and what that would do. And so you saying that he is a good character because he's able to get that point across, I suppose.
Yeah, he's able to show principle when principle is not necessary, or it's not enforced. There's no law to say, well, the reason. So, for example, today, because we have laws, the reason why people don't steal, a lot of people, I would say, it's not because of their conscience. It's because they'll get in trouble. So I'm sure some people do have a conscience, but yeah,
I'm sure some fools have a conscience, yes.
yeah, it's just I don't know. Well, that's one of the things I liked about that show was because it showed people kind of what kind of person they really are when no one's watching.
When driven to an extreme.
Yeah.
Colton, how do you feel about that definition?
You guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can
Yep.
hear you.
I've been sitting here thinking about it. I think that fundamentally characters are a facet to be used by an artist in furthering their own message. But I think that the distinction for me is what makes a good character from the viewer's perspective would be a character that at least has some realistic qualities. Because that's one thing I've always noticed is that anytime we think of a good character, there's always something that more human than a normal character would be, or at least an extreme version of that character would be. Which is one reason why whenever you think of a good character, you almost never think of an action movie hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, because while they are being used by the creator in whatever message, if there is one, to be conveyed, but it's not something that you remember. They don't seem human. But character development ties into that because real people develop themselves over time. That's what I was trying to say.
After 3 attempts.
And like fourth time explaining it to nothing.
Yes. Let me explain myself a bit more though. So, when I say that a character is a tool to be used, well, that is true. It does not define what makes a good character. Because you could have plenty of characters and they won't mean anything, even if they represent whatever you're trying to do. What goes into making a good character, a good tool, if you would like to put it that way, is a variety of things. And you're right, though. A lot of times, good characters have a sense of realism to them, which grounds them and makes them more relatable for the audience. So, uh, like, I wrote a paper about what makes a good hero, a good literary hero, and basically my main proof was the character needs to have flaws because otherwise uh, they have no challenges and they're not human because everyone has problems and everyone has flaws. And that's something that you need to see. That's something that almost every good character, every human character, possesses in some level is a flaw. Actually, you want to talk about D&D? The way I make NPCs and player characters, I start with what they want to achieve and what flaw, what personally, fundamentally, how are they fundamentally flawed? And that is how I build a character from there. I mean,
So, what would be a good example of that, Noah?
good example of using the flaw and the goal.
Like a like a character we would recognize with a flaw. That's one thing that has always bothered me on a side note here is
Hmm.
characters, because I agree that characters need to have flaws, but I don't like shows that kind of like beat you over the head with their flaws.
Absolutely. That was the problem
So
with
like,
like
Yeah.
Superman, the Superman movies, was that they didn't really understand what they were talking about. They just needed a flaw for the sake of having a flaw, and then
and
they
so you're
didn't
sitting
really
there going
respect
like,
it.
oh, just stop crying, just
Yeah,
move on.
absolutely. Um, damn it. So I got this K-On model from Japan, but every time I go to look at it when we're doing the podcast, I'm like, oh, now I want to bring up a K-On. But no, I did that too much. So I'm gonna give you a different example. And then I went to another anime. I
I
need to
think
get
I,
it.
I
I
think
have a
you're
problem.
struggling addict, Noah.
Damn. Uh, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead with it. So in Full Metal Alchemist, you have a character named Roy Mustang, and Roy Mustang. This is a spoiler, by the way, but Roy Mustang has a very close friend named Hughes, and at one point, Hughes ends up dying, and Roy Mustang goes on this huge uh, revenge trail, so to speak. But this act ends up defining him. Um, but it's not something that they beat you over the head with, like, oh, this guy needs revenge, because it eventually leads to him to a couple great scenes near the end where he's forced to, where you see that he realizes that Hughes is dead and there's nothing he can do about it, but he still has to move forward. And there's some bits where I don't know how to explain it, and I don't want to spoil it. But by having this character's death drive Hughes so much, something that, oh, you know what, this might not be the best example of a flaw, but it certainly goes into what makes a good character. So uh, by having Hughes die and it affect Mustang so much, we're able to see uh, how that action drives Mustang, and then how it changes him eventually, and then how he's pulled back, which you could call character development.
Yeah, I think the reason why character development is important. I think you need that. You need a flaw, or at least very realistic flaws, well as personal development within their own story, which is usually going to be separate from the main story. Um,
That's not true. It can be interwoven. Most of the time, it needs to be.
what I'm saying is, it's not like it's usually their personal or their own idea or whatever. In this case, it would be his story is Hugh's death, and then there must be some sort of development within storyline.
Yeah. Now, I'm gonna get back to you about a character with a flaw. because I have to think on that for a moment. But just having actually, you know what? Miyazaki movies are great with this. Not because the flaws in Miyazaki movies aren't anything that are tremendous. It's not like, oh, I have no respect for women. I don't know, or something like that. It's always something that's more down to earth and human. It's like, oh, this character has a tendency to be a bit more jealous. That's not what defines them. It's just a part of who they are and how they act. And then additionally, the
Very
way
human
those are,
quality.
yeah, it's something that everyone has. It's something that affects their choices, but it's not what they exactly defines them. And I always like the way Miyazaki handles it too, because taking jealousy for example, usually when you have a character that's jealous, it's always blown out of proportion and used as like a villain sort of thing, and it always annoyed me. But in at least Miyazaki movies, say if you were to have a jealous character, uh, it would be seen almost as more of a natural thing instead of an evil thing that's blown out of proportion. Yeah.
That's interesting. What would you say about all of this? Would you agree with that definition
Which definition?
of what makes a good character
Ah.
and development?
Or what makes good character development? Yeah. I got you. I got you.
I like how not only can we like argue about defining things, we can argue about what exactly the definition we just made is about.
Okay. Uh, do you have any examples of a character flaw?
Well, I was saying certain things like, thank goodness I don't have to answer this question. Uh,
See, usually in a good story, you don't point out what makes somebody who they are, right? Be that character
yes.
flaws or goals or whatever.
If I could amen and not seem like a jerk, I would amen.
But that is also the problem with a lot of children's media, is that they for some reason feel like they need to talk down to kids and that they need to point out what makes this person them almost. It's annoying, but that's also why I like Miyazaki films. But
Yeah,
then go on.
that's one thing I really appreciated about I don't know. Naruto is a mixed bag of this sort of thing.
It's true.
early se- early seasons, it was very much that sort of sense, but it did have some good values in it. But then later, about like his history, and you start to really and given that this character that's always been sort of cold or aloof about who he actually is, but not in a way that's frustrating. But then you realize how much like pain there was, and I also really appreciated how in that they did a really good job of contrasting between how people deal with pain. So Kakashi goes off and he kind of a figure for these students, and his classmate. I don't think you got this far, Noah. But he goes off and he joins all the bad guys because he's seeking revenge for it.
I do know about that fight though, where Kakashi finds his old friend.
Yeah.
If we ever do an episode about battles and like
About
fight
that,
scenes, we should probably bring that one up because it's pretty good.
everybody probably has no idea what we're talking about. So we're just talking.
Yeah, that's the problem. Whenever I bring up anime in school or in even on the
It's
podcast,
only us.
it's
Yeah.
only more often than not, it's only me too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I can talk about Naruto. Let's just bring that up more.
Feel free to.
But I do think it's funny that nobody watches the show.
No, we got 7 subscribers. 6 of them are us.
6 of them are us and family.
Yes.
We got one guy.
One guy that we didn't directly ask to subscribe.
Yeah.
We kind of nudged him there though.
Yeah, we have one fan. Oh man.
Back to characters though. So we talked
So
about
bring that
character
back.
development. We talked about character flaws.
Character design.
Um, we could talk about character design. I was gonna like talk about breathing life into your characters. How do you make
Do
them
that.
feel more alive?
Breathing life.
Yeah.
So the actions.
Yes, their actions, their movements. See, this is something I've learned a lot in animation, but it's something that can be applied to live action and even games if you stretch it. Is that a good way to show characters and character emotions, to display them, so to speak, is through the animation and the visual side. So, for example, if you have a character who's uh, scatterbrained, then maybe the room is always a mess. Or if you have a character who is uh, very precise and logical, and then maybe his clothes are sharp fitting, and I don't know, maybe he has like a maybe he's a sniper or something. But and then if you want to express emotions, you can do it in the same way, but also it's more often than not expressed in the environment. So you have a sad character, maybe put them in rain or a dark environment like nighttime. If you want a character to feel wonderment or joy or comfort, do like warm oranges and yellow tones. Uh, in Naoko Love Story, there's a confession scene, and it's on this like lake, and the whole sky is this brilliant yellows, oranges, and pinks. So those little things, those details in the world, can add to a character. Oh, and additionally, I forgot my favorite one is that character movement. The way a character moves and acts is just as important to telling the audience who they are and what they want. So back to the scatterbrain character, maybe they walk around without care, um, without paying attention to much or staying focused. You know, giving you another example from K-On! Because I can't hold it back anymore. There's a lot of shots of characters' legs because they think that, or Yamada, the director, has thinks that you can express a lot. You can express something about a character just as much by looking at their eyes than by looking at their legs and the way that they carry themselves. Right? So if you're being shy or you're nervous, even though on the top on your face and the rest of your body might look natural, your legs might be crossed or trembling or something.
Mm.
I need to stop talking. I talk way too much.
No, because I was thinking that I was gonna save my next comment for episode on setting. But that's a topic for another day. um, saying though, I think that that little details in character design, and specifically in animation, um, really manage to express the meaning in a character. Same situation with like whenever a setting, like with the raining, when somebody is sad, necessarily real, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't seem real.
Feel like a real. I don't know. It always kind of takes me out of the reality of the situation.
I suppose it's how it's handled. Because the rain has become a bit of a stereotypical
That's the thing, is that like
thing.
if somebody starts crying and like all of a sudden like it's just like thundering outside, it's like, oh, that's just not.
But because yes, there is that use where it's just oh everything's dreary. But the examples that I think that actually do it well are ones that put the character in a scene that's natural for them. So some place that you've seen them very often, and even though you have And even though it may be raining outside, it could still look sunny or natural, just not completely dark. So it's yes, use it, but use it in moderation.
That
Michael, do you have any comments on this stuff?
Yeah, so I think music can also do that too. You see in a lot of movies that once a certain, like, for example, in Star Wars, you know how Darth Vader, when he always enters a room, his theme plays, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's an example of how music can be owned by a character, I guess. Characters can also bring with them kind of maybe even a sound too. Like it can be a very eerie sound,
Yeah.
something like that. If that makes sense, yeah.
So you're saying that tying a certain sound or melody to a character can be equally telling?
Yeah, and at the same time, it like Colton said, it can't be too, what's the word? Predicting.
Right. Predicting.
Yeah, and stereotypical. So yeah, that's it.
A game that does that pretty well is Barely Default, which is an RPG for the DS that
Mm.
I've
Bravely.
never played, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Uh,
You mean Bravely?
I thought it was Barely Default.
It's barely default.
Shit, is it Bravely Default?
It's Bravely Default.
Oh, oh well. I'm still going to
Barely
talk about
Default sounds funny though. It's like you're just a little bit worse than average.
it. You just make average though.
Yeah, just barely.
All right, but the thing about Bravely Default is that each character has their own little theme, and the main track, and I believe maybe even hometowns, all all have motifs off this track that refers to one character, and then they all combined later in like the battle music and in specific scenes that are focused on one character. You can take these motifs and you put them into different variations uh, and different styles and different combinations, and you can pull out different emotions based depending on what characters are being used.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
go.
the demo to Bravely Default, um, as you call it. And I do remember being like noting that the music played a very big role, and the fact that it every character had their own music track. The fact that it wasn't just like that every character also had like individuality in a Final Fantasy type game. Not like in the originals, not the new ones, because the new ones are entirely character based. But the old ones would be like the black mage and the white mage and the knight. It's like there's no character there. But the fact that everyone had their own music really kind of helped with that. That's my point.
So we've covered character development, character details through the environment, character music. Uh, what else do we do? We did something
Everything.
else.
We talked about everything.
But we haven't really answered the fundamental question of how to make these specific things good. But I guess that would require a much larger video.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it really does just.
Situational, like Michael said.
We can give you a guideline for how to do it. Like we've described most of the, at least some of the attributes of a good character, right? And whenever you're creating a piece of art, what to do with that is make your characters fit that quality without being too abrupt about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how I would say you accomplish it. Well, just as difficult.
Yeah. It's still pretty difficult.
So we have so many bad characters.
We have a lot of sloppy storytelling though. Not just bad characters, just sloppy stories and art in general,
Yeah.
which is really due to just the mass-produced nature of storytelling in the modern age. That's why people who actually sit down and think through their works are very valuable.
Yeah, it's very money and fame driven.
It's true. The thing is, the people with the money and the people with the skills, usually the people with the money have to tell the people with the skills what to do, because otherwise the people with the skills couldn't actually make anything. Which is
Mm,
why the indie scene is so awesome for games, because the money guys no longer exist. You can fund the game yourself and still make something that's amazing.
right. That's why it's indie and they're not popular, right?
Yeah, not to say
Some
that they're not
do.
popular, but they're not widely, they don't have a large budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there's still stuff that
It's six
requires a large
guys in a
budget.
basement.
One guy in his mother's basement most of the time.
Yeah. I guess we should probably cut it off, right?
Oh yeah, we should probably wrap up soon. Unless you have any characters with flaws you want to talk about.
No, I'm still. I know that they exist, but I'm completely blanking.
Maybe we should have
What?
a whole episode for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
So
I'm
you
unclear
full.
on this.
Michael, do you have any?
Mm, I probably do, but I can't think of them off the top of my head right now.
Yeah.
You mean like characters from anywhere that I would
Yeah,
like to?
anywhere. That makes it easier.
Um,
You know, the old horror movies, like old slasher flicks, uh, they were basically everybody was a sinner except for one person, and so everyone had flaws in that sense, where they did something unvirtuous, and then
mm,
those characters who were unvirtuous would just die, and then the one person who wasn't the sinner, who was the virgin archetype, gets to live at the end of the movie. So
right.
that I wouldn't really say that's a good use of character flaws, but in that case, is the point is fairly clear.
Yeah, because in that sense, it's being used in a very practical sense.
It's true.
Based like you are flawed because you did this thing, and it's not
Yeah,
so much.
it's kind of it goes back to the question of, do your actions or intentions define you? I would say that a character's actions define him, right?
That's an interesting idea, because your actions define how others see you, and your intentions define how you see yourself.
Right. So I guess the better one would, I guess actions do, because a serial killer, for example, his intention, a lot of people are just, as far as they think that they're doing something that isn't exactly wrong. Like, I don't know, maybe if it's religious reasons, maybe they think they're purifying society or something. There was that one serial killer who had that idea. He thought I think he was, I'm not sure, I forget, but his motive was that the people he murdered were pure or unpure and evil, and so that was his motive. But he's still evil because he killed the people.
Hmm.
Well, on that note, killing the people. Uh,
Yeah.
we'll wrap up today's episode. Thank you.
What a fun
Thanks
way
to
to
one
end the
person.
show.
The one person, I won't name drop him, but the one person for watching. Um,
We love you.
we do love you.
We'll send you a box, one of those boxes. What are they called?
The
Gift
file
boxes.
cabinets.
Gift boxes? No, it was, I
Oh,
don't know.
a gift. I don't know what it's called.
I
like
don't know.
like a care package.
Care package, yeah, whatever. I think
It
so.
works.
All right, we we love you. Yeah.
True love right there.